Whether you're using virtual instruments or tracking a live guitar using plug-in effects to process the live signal, these tasks place an enormous burden on your computer system. Because of this heavy demand, it's likely that sooner or later you will have to deal with the latency problems. In this tutorial, I'll quickly go over some aspects of latency, how it affects your work in Nuendo, and some examples of settings to choose that will help to minimize the problem. There are several factors that determine latency on your system. The most important one is the sample buffer size of your sound card or audio interface. The sample buffer size is an option that is set within your sound card properties, as you can see here in the control panel of my RME Hammerfall card. It essentially determines how much time your computer has to process information before it must spit it out to your speakers for you to hear. Obviously, there's a trade-off with buffers. It goes like this. The smaller the buffer size, the less time your system has to process the information. Thus, the harder it has to work to keep up with everything that you're doing. Since the system is working faster, it means the more responsive your system is going to be, giving you instant results and snappy response. The larger the buffer size, the more time the system has to process information, giving it more headroom and the ability to keep a more stable CPU load. This results in a more stable system and sometimes the ability to use more plugins. However, since the system is taking its time to process the information, the slower the system will seem to respond to real-time playback or real-time changes done to plugins or other real-time functions, like hitting play on the transport, rewinding, fast-forwarding, or other functions. In order to choose the right settings, it's important to know when latency is a problem. First, when tracking live sources such as drums or guitars, and you want to use plugin effects in Nuendo to process the signal in real time as it's being recorded, latency problems can crop up, causing you and the musician to hear the playback somewhat delayed. I can guarantee you your guitarist or drummer won't be thrilled about this. Second, latency can also be an issue when playing virtual instruments in real time from a MIDI track. Once you've recorded the MIDI notes, any MIDI data played from Nuendo and triggered by the virtual instrument is sample accurate and contains no latency. The signal is only late when you're triggering the instrument in real time from a controller. To work around these situations, you can usually switch the buffer size of your audio interface to adjust to your specific situation. Although you can sometimes do this with a project already loaded, it's best to save and close Nuendo before making the change. It all really depends on the stability of the audio interface drivers that you are using. These are my general rules for buffer settings. 64 to 128 samples is best for tracking live audio and virtual instruments. This will achieve a latency of around 1.5 to 3 milliseconds. 256 to 512 samples is a good middle ground for tracking, editing, and mixing, offering an average of around 6 to 12 milliseconds of latency. Some people can still play or perform with this amount of latency. It all really depends on who you're working with. 1024 and higher are generally good for mixing only, with anywhere from 21 milliseconds all the way to 186 milliseconds. These may sound like small amounts, but any average musician can feel the lagging behind when tracking or playing an instrument with this much latency. However, since you're mixing, everything will be recorded and playing back from within Nuendo. Once it's in Nuendo, all the tracks are always sample accurate with each other. By using these higher buffer sizes, you allow for more room for the system to breathe and give you more room for additional plugins. Once it's in Nuendo, all the tracks are always sample accurate when playing back with each other. The only area you feel the latency is when performing transport commands or tweaking plugin knobs. You may see that the sound doesn't react quite as quickly when you're actually tweaking the parameter. Also, by using these higher buffer sizes, you allow for more room for the system to breathe and give you more room for additional plugins as well. I'd like to share one more tip to help avoid latency as much as possible. There are many things that can affect latency and exactly how low you can set your system and audio interface. Things such as CPU speed, your FSB bandwidth, and the quality of the software drivers and hardware of your audio interface all play an important role in deciding how low you can go. Also, Generally, external audio interfaces that connect via FireWire or USB ports do not offer the same type of robust bandwidth and performance that an internal PCI interface can offer. Because of these variables, I recommend that you always do a bit of research before investing in an audio interface, whether it be USB, FireWire, or an internal PCI card. Make sure to first understand what you require while working in the studio. Then do some research. Contact the manufacturers and find out what test results they can offer based on the type of system you plan to use. A little bit of pre-planning can go a long way in ensuring that you have an optimal setup to make the best out of Nuendo.